welcome to Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football. I am one of the post-game hosts, Desmond. I am here with the man himself, Mark Rogers. Before we get started, we'd like to encourage you to please like and subscribe this video. It helps the channel. Also share the video out on social media. As I mentioned, it does help our channel. And also, while you're at it, subscribe to Mark's main channel, The Voice of College Football. And also join his Discord to join in on the talks and chats that are going on. So, Mark, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Des. Doing well. Everything's good. It's good to know not just that that the weather's been cooperating for quite a long time here in Connecticut, but to actually know, to be assured that you don't have to check the weather necessarily to know that you won't be freezing. So to know day after day after day that okay, we've hit a good place where okay, I know that I'm going to be warm.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that our viewers that are in the South or Southwest is not something that they have to deal with. I have one of my a good friend who lives in Southern California, and it's 70 and sunny just about every day. So she doesn't have to deal with that. But for us in the Midwest and East Coast and all that, we've gotta check it because it could vary from large swings. I took a look at Denver. I think it was last week, but they had in a stretch of 7 days, I think multiple inches of snow and 87 degrees, like within 7 days. It was just wild.
Yeah, it's funny. I have spent quite a bit of time in Colorado, and they do have wild swings of temperatures and different climates there. It's kind of crazy, and their winters start way before anybody else's, and their winters end. Like it's not uncommon to get a little snow in May, but like in between, it's not like it is here where they're in the deep freeze the entire winter. It's like it'll be 65 one day, and then they'll get some snow for a couple of days, and then boom, it's back up to 70 degrees, and they're all over the place there.
I think if we had more, I think I'd be okay with our deep freeze that we get if there was more sunshine, because I think that
Yeah.
changes a lot of just your perception. It changes the feeling. They talk about the vitamin D, how it's good for you in
Yeah.
sunshine and all that good stuff. So I think that would make the winters a little more tolerable to be able to have just some more sunshine because we get a lot of gray in Michigan in the wintertime.
Yeah, a little bit more sunshine or a lot more sunshine and some breaks. Some breaks. Like if okay, it's 25 today and it might be 25 for a few days, but it's going to be 60 this weekend for a couple days and then back into the cold. Like you could take like I know a lot of people don't like the swings back and forth of the weather, but that doesn't bother me. Like if I knew, okay, if we get through the next 3 or 4 days, then there's going to be, some nice temperatures. That would break it up as well.
Yes, agreed. So yeah, we obviously here on the Michigan channel or got a couple topics that we want to talk about. One of the first ones I'd like to kind of jump into was JJ's rehab. So obviously, he's QB1A. I guess I'm not even quite sure how to put it, but essentially, he's a guy who's gonna have some significant time one way or another at the quarterback spot. And he was at, I believe, a camp he was sponsoring, but he spoke with reporters, and it sounds like his goodness, his rehab is going well. Things are progressing well. He mentioned just patience with the process and everything. So obviously that's a really good thing, a big positive. He was very limited in the spring. So was obviously that's a really good positive going into the summer to be able to, obviously you want to strengthen yourself, get a little bigger. I've been hearing that more even with some of the NFL quarterbacks of Zach Wilson. They talked about he's coming in a little bit bigger, built a little better. Same with Mac Jones in better shape. So kind of following along that same trend that obviously with JJ getting healthy is obviously a good thing, and hoping that that kind of translates into the fall and into the season. And that kind of leads me to next question, which is what let's assume that JJ is going to be healthy and he's we're going to come into fall camp and what do you think the chances are that Jim Harbaugh at some point in the fall in fall camp names JJ the starter? And I actually want to pose that to our viewers as well. But what do you think the chances are that at some point, and let's say it's the last day of camp and the week before your first week against Colorado State, what do you think the chances are that JJ is going to be named the starter?
Okay, before I take on the theoretical there with the health being not an issue, most likely the health's going to be, I don't think necessarily an issue, but it's going to provide a bit of a slower start for JJ going into August camp. So I think in reality, I think the percentage is going to be lower than what I'm going to answer for this question. So here we are. First day of August camp, JJ's healthy. He's ready to roll. There are no issues. Okay. I think that Jim Harbaugh is still going to honor what Cade McNamara accomplished last year. I think it's going to be difficult for him to make a move. I think he's going to need a substantial difference in their play and practice to make a move. I think if Cade McNamara is just at least doing what Cade McNamara does and he's making the right decisions and he's running the offense, I think Harbaugh is going to be okay with that. And I think he's going to stay with McNamara, still with probably at least as heavy a lean in terms of number of plays, packages, everything that he's going to give JJ going into the season. Probably he's going to have to step it up there even more. And then I think that the leash is going to be short. I think the hook's going to be quick. If there's not necessarily needing to be a loss, but a poor game, that maybe he's going to be looking for that opportunity to make the switch and go with the guy that he knows is a better quarterback. So I'm going to say JJ's got a chance of, in a perfect situation in regards to health, 40% chance of being selected the starter before the season starts, but I think it's more like 25% because he may be a bit off limits to start camp.
Yeah, and I think that percentage is probably a bit higher than what I would go, but the thing that makes me rethink it a bit is because I feel like we've seen in the past, year or so a different type of Jim Harbaugh where, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but essentially it just seemed different. It felt different is even before, the season started. So maybe it is a higher chance that does happen because I think it is pretty clear to see the trend of teams that make the college football playoff and teams that are playing at that level. you have to have a dynamic quarterback. Now he doesn't necessarily have to be a runner or things like that, which I think JJ's got that benefit. But I for as good of a quarterback as I think Cade McNamara is, and I think he's a really good quarterback, I think you need something a little bit more because when you look at just the elite defenses and defenses that can do a lot, that can limit a lot of offenses, a skill set like JJ's is one that it's extremely hard to game plan for. Like you can't run your best coverages because you need to have some eyes on the quarterback, and sometimes you can't run as many of your exotic blitzes that you really want to run because if you're caught out of position and you try to overload blitz one side and he comes out of the other end, I mean, you might be talking about, a 50, 60-yard gain or, a touchdown. So I wonder if Jim Harbaugh is thinking about those things, and maybe he's not, but thinking about, the goal and the future for this program, and especially for this year. I'm sure he has goals of winning the Big Ten again, getting to the college football playoff and winning a college football playoff game and getting to the national championship. And he sees the trend of, in order to get there, you are going to have a dynamic guy at quarterback, and if you don't, you're going to have to be absolutely elite everywhere, because we saw with Georgia that, I mean, they were a historic defense, and we saw the entire defense get drafted in the first round just about, so I mean, they were absolutely elite everywhere, except the quarterback spot. And Stetson Bennett played extremely well throughout their season. But when you see that, you have to wonder if you would weigh that out to say, well, I know we're elite at some spots, but I think we can all agree Michigan is not elite everywhere. So when that's the case, do you just make that change? Do you rip the Band-Aid off and say, hey, let's you know let's get it. Let's bring in JJ. We know what he's gonna do, and we just know the upside, because I think that if you want to come into this season as number one, the hunted, you are now being the hunted, and you want to get to the place that you were last year of in the conference championship, beating Ohio State, getting to the playoff. I'm not sure you can rinse and repeat, so to speak, to get there.
Yeah, so first off, if Jim Harbaugh's not thinking about everything that you just outlined, then that might be a fireable offense right there. He better be thinking about all that and processing that and really weighing, we talked about it a few weeks ago, the locker room. It's not an easy thing, because you want to respect and you want to recognize and honor a guy that got you there and accomplish things that haven't been accomplished for 17 or 18 years. But at the same time, you've got to also respect everybody else, even in the locker room, to say, we want to give you individually the best chance of winning. So the guy that's going to be in charge needs to be the best player. So it's not easy. And Cade McNamara is not the type player that you really put packages together for like you do a la JJ McCarthy. So that's kind of difficult too, because sometimes you've got this dynamic where you've got the runner and you've got the thrower, and maybe the runner's the backup, which is kind of a good thing in this situation, because you can build a little mini offense for him, packages, bring him in and do that. But Cade McNamara is not that guy that you would like be bringing into a game to show the defense something different. And so that's kind of difficult, because then he becomes the backup quarterback who's only going to see the field because it's garbage time, it's mop-up duty. Otherwise, you're just giving him series just to give him series, not because he's doing anything to the defense or presenting anything different. So that's difficult too.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, but I almost wonder, like, is Michigan in a bad spot with this? Like, is talented, when you look at each quarterback just in a vacuum, regardless of Michigan's situation, like you almost wonder that. Like, wouldn't you rather have a clear-cut guy who is, that guy? And I think JJ's, injury over the spring kind of maybe took away that opportunity for that to happen. But I mean, would you kind of think that this is not an ideal situation, because there's almost no winning in this situation, right? Like because I think there's some people who would say, well, Cade's not going to play poor enough to actually get the hook to just pull him, and now JJ's the number one. So you're always going to have to share time. And within that, well, then Cade's only going to have a certain amount of plays that he can make. I think he's talented, but there's only a certain amount that he can make, whereas JJ can make more of those plays, but he's going to have limited time. So it's almost as if Jim Harbaugh doesn't make that change, it really makes it a very difficult situation. There's almost no winning in it. I just don't. Yeah. I don't know how you navigate that to where it's actually a good situation. It sounds weird, because you're talking about two good quarterbacks, but I mean, I kind of feel that way.
Yeah. You can imagine the conversation, or maybe you can't, because I don't know that anybody can get into Harbaugh's head or try to duplicate what that conversation is going to be. But for anybody else sitting down with Cade McNamara, you're about to break it to him that you're making a quarterback change. And let's say this is not after a 4 interception game in which he can say, okay, we're going in a different direction. This is either week 1 or this is after he's played a couple weeks, but you've thought, okay, we're getting JJ into 20-25% of the offense, but I ultimately have added up everything you've discussed, and we need to get to that destination. We think he's the guy. But you're having this conversation with Cade McNamara. Okay, he's got more tenure. He's got more time. He's won the Big Ten championship. He's accomplished all this stuff from last year. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's a model leader, quarterback, all those things. And you're basically telling him somebody else is giving us a better opportunity to win long term. Well, you just had this conversation with him, and then what happens if J.J. McCarthy gets hurt 2 weeks later, and you just told Cade McNamara that somebody else is better equipped to lead the team to a championship? Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Now that would be an absolute nightmare scenario. Well, because my thing is, let's kind of walk this scenario out. Let's say it's against Maryland, the first conference game, and Cade gets the hook. Well, with the transfer rules, if I'm not mistaken, I think if you've played 6 or less games, you can transfer, and that wouldn't count against your eligibility, I believe. Well, okay, let's say he enters the transfer portal that Sunday, and then JJ gets nicked up against Iowa. You know what I mean? Like that. Sure. It's of course it's hypothetical, and there's a lot of things that could happen. But I don't think that's an unrealistic thing, because maybe not that specific situation, but injuries happen. I mean, at some point everybody's going to be nicked up to some extent. So it's a really tough situation. And like I said, this is why these guys make the big bucks, is because you've got to make the decision, and if you get it wrong, then there's no book to get it right. But if you get it wrong, people in the media are gonna slander you, and why'd you do that? The Monday morning quarterback. So there's really no ideal situation.
And I can't think of another place in college football right this second that's got this dilemma. There are quarterback battles out there, but it's more so like both guys are inexperienced. Somebody else left. They moved on. 2 inexperienced quarterbacks. Or where there's not this hierarchy of the guy that's won the job, and the starting quarterback has all these accomplishments, and we won all this with him, but he's not as good as and talented as the backup that is everybody's pushing to play. I can't think of a scenario quite like this around college football right now.
If I had to go out on a limb, and I'm not all that well versed on Florida State's quarterback situation, but I know they had Mackenzie Milton, who kind of was making his way back last year, and I thought he had some stretches where he played well, but I don't know who he's battling with that quarterback battle. But yeah, I even to that extent, I'm not sure it's similar to Michigan's situation.
Yeah, so Mackenzie Milton, obviously at UCF, was a great quarterback, had some big seasons, 40 touchdown type seasons, had that horrific injury. Then he goes to Florida State. So he won the starting quarterback job early, played pretty well against Notre Dame. They came close to winning that game. But Jordan Travis was the guy that was kind of a part-time starter the year before and played better than Mackenzie Milton, and ultimately won the job. And they would have to play Milton at times because Jordan Travis got hurt at Florida State. But it was pretty clear, well into the season, that Jordan Travis was at this point a better player, can just do more things. Mackenzie Milton had obviously not recovered from his injuries, even though he did have a couple. He played well against Notre Dame and almost brought them back to a win, but he kind of faltered throughout the season. And He's moved on. So Florida State's they're clear cut at quarterback with Jordan Travis. So
Okay.
Stetson Bennett's there's some correlation between this and Georgia and Stetson Bennett, where just from a talent standpoint, if you're just believing recruiting analysis, rankings, scouting reports, he's the worst quarterback in the Georgia room, but he's just won a national championship. So that kind of separates it from Cade. For as much as McNamara accomplished, you win a national championship. That's really tough to unseat that guy. And I don't think any of the quarterbacks, Carson Beck, Brock Vandegrift, any of those guys have shown what JJ. I'm not saying they're not as good because their recruiting rankings show that they're in that category, but JJ's actually been on the field and shown us in games.
It's
Why don't we play this guy?
it is special. It is special because I'm hesitant at times when the high caliber guys come in 4-star, 5 stars, because I'm just more so of once I see it on the field against other college football players, that's when I'll kind of make the judgment and get excited. But when I saw JJ, and especially more so even though it was a loss in the Georgia game, to where Michigan was down and garbage time essentially, but they just let him just throw the ball quite a bit. I mean, the ball looked very different and it looked special coming out of his hands. I mean, there aren't many guys that I've seen throw the ball like that. It just looked very, very different. And even though that game was a loss, I mean, that was exciting to see that is the future at quarterback for Michigan.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I was doing something online. This was a couple months ago, and I think I mentioned this to you and said this on the show. The same thing that I saw that on YouTube. Boom, Georgia, Michigan highlights, or maybe it was a JJ McCarthy specifically, and I just thought, yeah, I'm going to check this out because this game's a blur at this point. It was months ago, and yeah, he threw about 4 passes that were just lasers that just split defenders, and he just reared back, and then he also took off a couple times where for the entire night, like it looked like everybody from Michigan's running in quicksand, like running on the beach, and versus the Georgia players. And suddenly, a couple times with JJ was kind of reversed. Well, like he turned a corner and a couple of Georgia guys didn't catch him, and and I was like, wow, yeah.
It looks different, and also too, just keep in mind those were essentially NFL players that he was running against. I mean, a lot of those guys went in first and second round, so I mean, we're talking high caliber
Yeah.
defenders, and it looked a lot different. It looked a lot different. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how things go. And Antoine Johnson, thanks for tuning in. It has a comment says Dante Moore probably wants to come to Michigan with all these weapons. It's probably why he's making constant visits, hasn't committed. And I think he mentioned something else. Here it is. This is probably the reason Dante Moore won't commit because he sees a 5-star quarterback on the bench. Now, I'm not quite sure that's the reason, but it could be. It very well could be a reason that because if we are talking as just fans of college football, how different and special JJ looks, but he's not the starting quarterback. I mean, who knows? Maybe Dante Moore sees similar, and maybe you just never know when it comes to 17, 18-year-old kids. But I mean, there is some rationale and reason with what Antoine's saying.
Yeah, I think so, because you can look at a coach and look at his track record of how he treats that position and say, does he lean more in the category of he's going to always go with the more experienced quarterback, the higher tenured guy, and just the guy that's been there regardless? Or is he a guy that's just going to say, I'm playing the best player regardless?
Yeah, I mean, he's always said that it is a what does he say, merit based. He's a merit based coach, I think, or merit based position where, and based on that, Cade has more merit than
Yeah.
JJ does. So it is it's interesting, but we will see kind of how that story goes and how how things go. So as we start to next thing I wanted to get into, and it looks like you wanted to say something, so I
Well, I
kind of
was going to
paused a bit.
say, and I mentioned this to you before we started the show, that I thought at some point we had thrown out a poll on the community page with quite a few responses on it. Was something tailored to the quarterback situation and the way it stood right then, and I was looking for it and did not come up with that. So maybe we'll send out another poll in regards to we'll craft some kind of question uh, pitting Cade and JJ to see what everyone's responses are, because I'm not finding that poll that we had sent out at some point last season
Okay.
about the quarterback position.
I'm kind of scrolling through as well, so I'm sure we'll find it. We'll find it. So to roll through,
Sorry, Des.
you
I've
got it.
started you and stopped you and started you and stopped you, but I just found it. So this was quite a long time ago. So this was going back, if anyone can do the math for me, 7 months ago, whatever that would have been. That would
So
have been.
5 months ago would be, so that would have been October,
Why
essentially.
doesn't YouTube just give us a date? So I would be better with that. It was sometime, it appears to be late in the season.
Yeah, because
The
5 months
double post
ago would
before
be
that, yeah, they were 6-0.
June.
So this is about
Okay.
mid-season. And we asked who should be Michigan's starting quarterback for the rest of the 21 season. And we got 771 votes. And at that point, it was, you got to consider Michigan's 6-0, 7-0, 7-1, something in that range. And Cade McNamara got 55% of the almost 800 votes.
That's interesting. I wonder. I think about timing with that. Number one, if Michigan, because I think there would have been a difference if Michigan was 6-0 versus whatever that was 7-1. Like if we run that poll before the Michigan State game and then after the Michigan State game, and not saying obviously that it was all on Cade. Both of the guys actually
played a
made
really
some
good game
right.
against Michigan State.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yes, he did. I think he threw for what 400 something
That was
yards.
the most I was ever impressed with him. Was
Yeah.
after that game.
Yeah,
I thought he looked really good.
Well, and then JJ had what 2 fumbles, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had 2 fumbles, maybe lost one or something. Yeah. So I wonder. I wonder about timing. If that if had we had that poll after the Michigan State game, if it would have been maybe swayed even more towards Cade, to where you say, well, shoot, a guy who threw for 400 something yards and multiple touchdowns, did have the late pick, but I think that's one of those games where you had one guy play really well, and then for JJ, he had the 2 mistakes. So it's just a tough spot.
Des, you know what might change people's minds and might be reflected in a poll now is the Georgia game. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to think, okay, we've got this really good team. We won the Big Ten. We beat Ohio State. We just flattened Iowa. And we've got this quarterback we like. We understand he's not going to be, Russell Wilson at the next level, but we like him for what we do. And he complements our approach to football. And, we think we're really strong, and boom, we're headed toward the playoffs. But then once you see it against Georgia and think, okay, maybe we can't get by with a guy like this. We need that extra gear.
And I even would be interested to hear, even for Georgia fans. I'm sure they had other things on their mind by the time they saw JJ, but I would be interested to get their take on it, on seeing JJ and just how he performed. I mean, it wasn't anything that if you just only looked at the stat sheet where you'd be blown away, but if you actually watched and saw what those throws look like, I think it would. I'd be interested and curious to hear what a Georgia fan would say about that, and just who knows? Maybe they say, yeah, no, I think you got the right guy starting, or it could be, why the heck do you have number 9 sitting on the bench? That kid is special. Who knows? But it's a difficult situation. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Antoine had made another comment, and I think he Yep, here it is. And he put, I'm not saying Cade is bad, but JJ allows us a chance to unlock our full potential. We have a Ferrari sitting in the driveway and scared to drive it. I mean, I think as far as unlocking the full potential, I think he does. I think JJ does give you that ability, and it gives you a larger margin for error. I think with Cade, he's going to be he's going to be terrific within the confines of the offense. I think JJ's got the ability to be terrific within it, and also too on just making plays with his legs, extending plays, and throwing out of the pocket and just running around as well. So I agree with what Antoine's saying, and it's a tough spot. I mean, I think if Jim Harbaugh were to make that announcement in fall camp, I think that would be him just continuing to reinvent himself. In a way, because it would really go against his track record and what he's always done when it comes to especially the quarterback position. But it could be the key, I think. But we may never know.
Because there had to be an injury with Alex Smith to open the door for Colin Kaepernick, right?
Yep. He had a concussion, if I'm not mistaken. And at that point, I mean, Colin Kaepernick was rolling. I mean, they weren't throwing the ball a ton, but their running game was just unreal. And then you had the defense to stop people as well. So even that situation was different and unique. And I think for Michigan to get where they want to be, I think they have to make that switch. And I feel bad saying that because I am a fan of Cade McNamara and how he's played, and not that I'm not a fan of JJ, but I look at a guy who is probably overachieving a bit in Cade, and you want to root for that guy. Like, he hasn't done anything wrong. Like, all I've done is been a steady ship. He hasn't been perfect by any stretch, but it's difficult for me to say it, but it probably needs to be said that in order for Michigan to get back to where they want to be, I think JJ's got to be QB1.
I'll only say one other thing because I agree with everything you just stated, and I think it's pretty obvious by every other angle I've taken on this, except for this. There is a small chance. Go look through quarterback rankings. Go to your favorite year. Just go through all the 247 Sports Composite. Look at all the 5-star quarterbacks. There's quite a few that become busts. Now, I think JJ's shown us enough. I don't know how many passes he threw last year, 40 or 50 probably. I think he's played enough to show us that he won't be a bust.
I would agree with that.
But he hasn't been on the field against fill in the blank, Wisconsin, Ohio State. Every play, this is your offense, you're the guy, the whole game's on you.
Yep. Well, and for some of the old school mentality coaches, I mean, players, especially at the quarterback position, that are more quote unquote more exciting, lead to more turnovers. And I think someone had put that in the chat, but let's see. I think it was Dave. But I mean, he has a point that, when you're running, because actually JJ had a play early it was in the out of conference, one of the first couple games where he rolled out and made a throw kind of across his body and across the field, and it was a touchdown. And I think most conventional wisdom as far as coaching quarterbacks would say you never want to do that. It's just not, and that's why you rarely see it, is because guys are coached so much not to do that, because usually bad things happen. But that ended up being a positive play, a huge play. But the same thing could be said on that is, well, if you're playing Ohio State, if you're playing a Georgia, that's a pick six. So it kind of goes both ways. I think they're both hypothetical situations, but nonetheless, I mean, you could see the potential positive and also the potential negative too. So it's I think JJ should be the guy. He should be QB1, but I don't feel great saying it because of what Cade has done. So it'll be interesting to see how camp goes. I'm sure that'll be something that a lot of people will be keeping their eyes on. Number of reps. I'm sure we'll be getting tweets and things from all the insiders that are at camp that just keeping track. But JJ's had 15 reps with the ones and Cade's had 14. Or I'm sure things like that will definitely
Yeah,
be coming out on Twitter, and I'm here for all of it, to be quite frank. So
no doubt.
yes, yes. So the next thing I wanted to get into was Michigan's schedule, and I had a question for not only you, Mark, but also our listeners tuning in and our viewers. But so we've got the schedule. We've kind of talked about it with the out of conference. In conference, you go Maryland, at Iowa, at Indiana, Penn State at home, Michigan State at home, Rutgers on the road, Nebraska at home, Illinois at home, and on the road to Ohio State. And my question is, which game or which week will we know, like absolutely know, who Michigan is, like who this 2022-2023 team is? And I will give you the floor, Mark.
All right. The 3 non-conference games, see ya. It's just, yeah. I wish we had something to go on there, but we don't. And that's going to bring us to our latest poll question. And I would respond that I'm going to be one of the more that are annoyed with Michigan's non-conference schedule. All right. Then you got Maryland. And I think Maryland's going to be what they were pretty much last year. I think they finished 7-6. They won a bowl game, but the gap between them and the heavyweights is still just ridiculously wide. And they lost by 7 touchdowns to Ohio State. So I'm going to actually split this answer because I think Iowa is so strong defensively and on special teams, and it's at Iowa, could be a night game, difficult, one of the more difficult places to play in college football. So for Michigan's offense, I want to see them play the Iowa defense. For Michigan's defense, I don't think there's going to be any great accomplishment in not shutting down, but limiting the Iowa offense. It's not a good offense. Probably won't be again this year. Hasn't been a good offense for a long, long time. It just, they don't address it, and it is what it is. They win on defense and special teams, but they will probably have they always have a top 15 to 20 defense. In some years, it's more like top 10. So I want to see that game. And then certainly 2 weeks later, Penn State, if Penn State's as good as I think they'll be, which is top 15 to 20 in the country, that I'll have a pretty good read on Michigan at that point. So at that point, we are 7 games deep.
Yeah, man. The more that you talked about it, it made me waver a little bit. My answer was going to be Iowa because I think number one, the just the environment, playing on the road, and I mean that's going to be the first road game of the season for Michigan. So I think it'll give us a picture of what that's going to look like. I mean, because to me, if you come out in that game, and maybe it doesn't exactly answer the question, but and if that's a repeat of the Big Ten championship where you're talking 40 to what, 3 or 7, whatever the case was, I mean, at that point, I would think I've got a pretty good grasp of who Michigan is. Now, you still have plenty of games to get through to get to November 26th, but it's I would think week 5. I think once that game is over, and like you said, I mean, if I'm Iowa, I would definitely make that a night game unless Iowa's like 2-3, like just a disaster at that point. But yeah, if Iowa's undefeated or 1 loss and Michigan's the same, I would definitely make that a night game. But I think we'll know who they are by that game. So it'll be interesting because, like you said, I think you can count on a couple things with Iowa. You mentioned the defense, you mentioned special teams, and they're going to be coached really well. Like they're not going to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to be very disciplined. They're majority of the time going to be in the right spots. So if you're able to just, be methodical and efficient on offense and you're able to stymie them on defense, I think it will show that Michigan is in really good shape, and I think it'll give us a shot to know who they are. And maybe that's a difficult question to say that but I it'll be interesting because to me, let's say they beat Iowa by 10, beat Indiana, and beat Penn State, let's say 24-21, and then they have a repeat performance against Ohio State, then we will definitely be wrong. Saying that, well, I know for sure who they are. So maybe it's a difficult question, and that's okay. But yeah, because I think that can definitely change things as well.
That trip to Iowa, in many ways, is similar to their trip to Wisconsin last year. They rolled over non-conference teams, including Washington, who was supposed to be a top 25 team that turned out to be an awful team. And they get to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin didn't turn out to be a great team, but they turned out to be a top 25 team. They turned out to be not a vintage Wisconsin team. They were kind of a run-of-the-mill, nobody's going to remember Wisconsin. They went 9-4. They won a pretty marginal bowl game. It was not a great Wisconsin year, but it was a good team. But Michigan's lost all these road games against anybody that's been good in the Big Ten, and they finally pulled through and won a game like that. So that showed us something. That was the first big test for last year's team. The way things are shaping up, if all these preseason expectations are true, then Ohio State's just going to be another gear. Like we can find a lot out against Iowa, Penn State, Michigan State. But if we truly want to know, again, we're assuming a lot. I am assuming a lot, but it's going to be the Ohio State game. It might be until the very end to where we know that they're really good.
Yeah. And that might be the answer. Like, we may not know who Michigan is until November 26th at about 4 p.m. Or maybe 1 p.m. maybe by halftime. It's like, okay, we kind of know. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the interesting part of the way Michigan's schedule just overall in general kind of plays out, with having Ohio State at the end. You usually have Michigan State and Penn State kind of in the middle. So I think the plus side for Michigan is they get your out of conference schedule is what it is. You get Maryland at home before you have to go to Iowa. So I think you're I don't want to hurt any Maryland fans' feelings out there, but I think we can all agree Michigan's probably going to win that game, and I don't think it'll be a dogfight. So you get the Iowa game, and then you've got Indiana before you have Penn State, but also Penn State's at home. You got Michigan State at home. So I think they get some breaks when it comes to their schedule. I mean, it's not ideal with having, or actually it is ideal, because you got Penn State and then you have a bye week, and then you've got Michigan State. So they've got some, they definitely have some breaks when it comes to the schedule, and you've got Illinois at home the week before you play Ohio State. So I once again don't want to hurt any Fighting Illini feelings, but that's another game that I think Michigan will be okay as far as, you're not going to have a dogfight. You're going to be probably easily 2 touchdown favorites in that game, I'd imagine. And you're, by halftime, you should be having your 2s in and resting your guys, getting ready for Ohio State. So, I mean, the schedule lines up to where they could be in really good shape going into that Ohio State game.
Yeah, so we asked a question 2 weeks ago. Are you annoyed that Michigan is not playing a non-conference Power 5 opponent in 2022? I would be in the yes column, but only 43% of Michigan fans are in the yes column out of 385 that responded. So I guess Michigan fans are just looking for wins, which is fine. I get it.
Yeah.
But I would like to see Auburn, Oklahoma State,
Yeah.
somebody,
It's it.
somebody.
I get it because I'm one as well. I love to see those top teams and ranked teams kind of play each other. Um, and Michigan has a quite a couple years like we went through that I think last week or the week before where they had Notre Dame a couple times and they've had some tough teams in the out of conference. Uh, my thought is if your schedule works out this way, you got to take advantage of it. Like you can't finish this season with two losses and think you're going to get any type of sympathy or notion that you are one of the best teams in college football because as soon as you get your first loss, whenever it is, the first thing they're going to say on ESPN was, look at the out of conference schedule. And it may not be fair, but that's exactly what is going to happen. Is they're going to say, well, look who they played in the out of conference. They didn't have a Power 5 team, so on and so forth. So, and nonetheless, the situation is what it is. Your schedule isn't changing, and that's fine. But you got to take advantage, and you also have to understand what comes with it. That, if you end up losing a game to Penn State or losing to Michigan State, the first thing that they're going to talk about is, well, they didn't play anybody up until this moment. So now, so just Michigan fans, hopefully we don't have to have that conversation. But if it does happen, understand that's the narrative and that's the talking points that we're going to see on the major networks of, well, and it's just with the head coach you have as well, Jim Harbaugh. Like he gets a lot of criticism. I think good chunk of it unfair, but it just is what it is. So those are the things that you get when you don't have a great out of conference schedule and you drop a game. Because I can't remember if it was, I don't think it was Baylor, but there was some team last year that essentially had the same. They didn't have a great out of conference, and they just never really moved up in the rankings. They just kind of hit a ceiling, and a lot of people on the networks and stuff were just, well, look at their out of conference. So it's you just take advantage of it. This schedule is laid out is about as favorably as it can get. You've got a week in between Penn State and Michigan State. You get Illinois before Ohio State. You've got what team did I mention before Iowa? Maryland. You got Maryland before Iowa. It's a favorable schedule. So you just got to take advantage of it, because if you're in the Big Ten title game, I don't think it's really going to matter.
Yeah, if they win the Big Ten, the non-conference will not matter. Granted, if they've got two losses and win the Big Ten, that they will probably have an issue. But a one-loss Big Ten champion, they should be in good shape. And those non-conference games, having been all stacked up at the beginning of the year, are going to be long forgotten by most people. But you're going to have your debate, because we hear it all the time. If they trounce those teams, certain people will give them a lot of credit for looking good, but then other people will say, I don't care if it was 52-3 and 55-7 and another score like that. Look at the opponents. So yeah, the schedule does, the difficult games are spaced out. The two are at home, Penn State, Michigan State. You're going to get some split between the difficult teams home and away, but they're spaced out. So, yep,
You got to take advantage. That's all I'll say. Because that's the schedule with playing in a tough conference. Big Ten, SEC. I'd probably throw the Big 12 in there. The conference is tough. Like, you're going to play good teams in the conference, and if you can get a schedule that's favored this way, this is about as good as it gets, playing in one of the major conferences. I would argue the best or second best conference in the country. You usually don't get out this good. So I would definitely hope that they take advantage and are in one loss team when it comes to November 27th. So we uh we will see how that goes. We will see how that goes. Antoine says Big Ten schedule's hard enough. We don't need to schedule hard out of conference. It doesn't benefit us. And see, and that's where we are today with the college football playoff. I mean, I would kind of agree with what Antoine's saying because you don't get any, strength of schedule points. I mean, this isn't March Madness where, hey, we got some quadrant one wins and you don't get that. You have two losses, you are going home, unfortunately. So I agree with what he's saying. Because I look at a team, obviously the big rivals, but I look at Ohio State. Had they played Oregon State instead of Oregon and won, they may be in the college football playoff, even with losing to Michigan and not going to the Big Ten title game. So he's got a point. I mean, I definitely get where he's coming from.
Absolutely. There's pretty much a dividing line between you win the conference, you've got a 90-some% chance of making the playoff. If you don't win the conference, you've got to be a really special team under special circumstances. It's only happened 3 times. I guess we've got Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia that have been non-conference champions that have made the playoff, and they had a ton of respect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if you win the Big Ten, unless it's some kind of strange year where teams are just winning and there's multiple losses there, you're going to get in and nobody's going to question the non-conference as opposed to losing a difficult non-conference game. Yeah, the way it's set up right now usually doesn't help you.
I'd be interested to see the data on was it 8 years? Has it been 8 years of the college football playoff? Yeah. Of seeing the teams that scheduled it maybe a ranked team, out of conference, and seeing if there's any type of correlation at all. There may not be, but I'd be just interested to see if there is or is not any correlation on that scheduling a ranked team, because the I guess narrative would be, well, you got your team ready, or whatever the case may be, but that's what the narrative would be, is that, oh, well, they played a tougher schedule, a tougher team out of conference, so got them ready for, their conference schedule. I'd be interested to see if there's a correlation on that, or even on the flip side of teams that do schedule, ranked teams are less often to make the playoff. Like I'm just with discussing it just interesting. I wonder if there is any correlation one way or another.
So obviously it doesn't impact the conference championship. Doesn't count toward it one way or the other. So we only have the 3 that have made it as a non-conference champion. I know that Ohio State team in 2016 went on the road and beat Oklahoma, who won the Big 12, finished in the top 10. And that was a big win for Ohio State. Had they not played that game, I don't know that they would have been selected, because it was much talked about that they got the nod over the Big 10 champion because they did go on the road, beat Oklahoma, and they had a really difficult game out of division against Wisconsin, who was in the top 10 as well. Of course, Georgia had the win against Clemson. It wasn't a great Clemson team, but they still finished 10-3. I got to think that Georgia's still going to get selected for the playoff based on what they did during the regular season in the SEC, even if that game would have been against a group of 5 team, let's say. I don't remember who Alabama played non-conference in 2017, if they had a tough non-conference game.
It was not.
I don't remember.
Was that Florida State? So that.
Oh,
was
yeah,
that,
yeah.
Yeah. So that was Florida State. That was the one.
Yeah. Which.
Yeah.
Which is, I remember that game. So
that
24-7.
Yep.
So
24-7, and they lost to Auburn the last rivalry week. Yep.
So that all depends on how you rate that Florida State game, because when they played Florida State was number 3 in the country, supposed to be a great team. and lost their starting quarterback. Bama knocked out DeAndre Francois. So Florida State didn't have a good year. They went 7-6. So you could spin it one of two ways. You could say, well, they beat a really good team that was expected to do great things, but they didn't have their quarterback the rest of the year. You could say they were overrated and Bama beat a pretty marginal team. I don't know that really. I think the SEC has just become a bit of a different animal, and so Bama put themselves in position because there was no other conference champion that they were being compared to that only had one loss. The rest of them had two losses. Ohio State would have been the team that would have been selected, but they lost 2 games that year as the Big Ten champion. So, yeah.
It'd be interesting. It's yeah, I don't know if there's any real correlation, but all I know is Michigan's got a very favorable schedule, and when that happens, you just love to ride that into conference championship and getting yourself to the playoff. And it'll be interesting to see too. Will Georgia be the same historic Georgia team that we just watched last year? I mean, I think anyone would probably err on the side of no, just because of the draft picks they just lost and you know the talent that they lost, but they also recruit at a very high level. So it's interesting, but you would think, okay, well, if Michigan gets back to where they were last year, would they have a better shot with being, now you've been there before. This isn't a brand new experience for you. So you know what the travel looks like, you know what the practice looks like, you know that there's a bit of a lull in there, and all those things that come with it. Do they end up in a better spot, next year getting into the playoff?
Yeah. I don't have that answer. I think they're a good team. I think they're a somewhat flawed team, like just about everybody else is, but I think they're really good, and I think they will be contending for the conference championship.
I would agree, and I'm sure our viewers here on the Michigan channel would definitely like to see that happen again. And for myself, I absolutely would like to see that because, man, it's a lot of fun when when the team is winning, and we get a lot of people joining in and watching, and the channel grows. So it's all good things here. All good things here.
Yeah, the channel definitely revved up as they continue to win during the back half of the season, going into the Big Ten championship game. Absolutely, it revved up big.
Yep. It'll be nice. We get to talk with Corey during the regular season versus the postseason. So I'm sure our listeners will be revved up and ready to to talk with Corey. I like Corey a lot. I really do. I follow him on Twitter and we interact quite a bit. And but no, I like Corey a lot. So hopefully we'll be able to get the schedules and everything to work to be able to get on. Him come here and potentially us go there as well. And I believe as of now, Dre will be back by that time. So it'd be cool to to have us on his channel and him come here again. So.
Well, I had to build a massive spreadsheet because I got 10 of these shows and I wanted to line it up. I knew it wasn't going to work, knew it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted to line up all the opponents' media guests in order of the schedule. And I wasn't quite able to pull it off. When I say not quite able, after 2 weeks, wasn't able to pull it off. And so, yeah, so I think whatever we're lined up for, UConn, again, I don't know that anyone's going to be too down and out if we don't get a UConn media guest, but we'll try. But we'll make sure we dive into the Big Ten and we can bring Corey on for the Iowa game here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll be excited. Hopefully we can get him on. And I think he usually runs the shows a little bit later. I've seen like a couple times I'll be cooking dinner or whatever, watching TV, and I'll see on Twitter that he's getting ready to go live, and I'll always hop in and check it out. So no, it'll be good to kind of chat with the other guys and just kind of talk about the teams and kind of get our fans to see some other some fresh faces for a little bit. So,
For sure.
well,
Well,
I think that is it for us. Did you have anything else, Mark? Or
I
I was about to say
don't.
you probably have to run.
I
So
am moving on. Yeah.
appreciate it. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. As always, we definitely appreciate it. Once again, on your way out, please give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. And that is it. We'll see you next week, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that is it. Thanks, Mark.